The first family did not fall apart because of financial ruin. It did not collapse because of war or natural disaster. Instead, its downfall appeared to begin with one woman whose name surfaced only a handful of times in surviving Alabama records, yet whose presence seemed to cast a shadow over three influential plantation families for nearly 2 decades. Though history preserved little about her directly, the fragments that remain suggest she occupied a place far more significant than the official records were willing to admit. The way she was described depended entirely on who was writing. Plantation ledgers reduced her to valuable property. A church register recorded her name without a surname, as though even her identity deserved no permanence. A county court clerk referred to her simply as the colored woman connected with the dispute, yet private letters painted a strikingly different picture. Hidden among personal correspondence were references to whispered meetings after dark, bitter disagreements between brothers, unexplained revisions to family wills, and marriages that quietly unraveled without anyone willing to explain the cause. In the plantation counties of central Alabama during the 1840s, reputation often carried greater value than land itself. Wealthy families built their fortunes on cotton, enslaved labor, and carefully maintained public respectability. Business partnerships, political influence, and family inheritances depended as much on appearance as on prosperity. A single scandal had the potential to destroy relationships that had taken generations to establish, making secrecy one of the most valuable assets a plantation family could possess. Perhaps that explains why so many surviving records seem determined to erase her from the historical narrative. Yet the more thoroughly her name disappeared from official documents, the more clearly the shape of her story began to emerge. Absence itself became evidence, leaving behind patterns that modern researchers could no longer ignore. As historians examined probate files, census records, plantation account books, and faded collections of family correspondence, they uncovered an unusual pattern. 3 neighboring plantation families, linked through marriage, land transactions, and the cotton trade, all experienced remarkably similar crises within only a few years of one another. Enslaved individuals were quietly transferred between estates, children disappeared from household inventories without explanation, and court filings hinted at private settlements that never reached a public courtroom. At the center of every trail stood the same woman, not as a plantation owner, not as a formal witness, but as someone whose personal relationships had become dangerous enough to reshape the fortunes of families who believed they controlled everyone around them. Her influence was never openly acknowledged, yet its consequences appeared again and again throughout the surviving records. Was she truly the calculating manipulator later family legends claimed her to be? Had she deliberately turned powerful men against one another to secure her own survival? Or was that image carefully invented by wealthy families desperate to conceal a far darker truth about themselves? The surviving evidence offers no simple answer. Instead, it presents a puzzle assembled from scattered plantation ledgers, forgotten newspaper notices, neglected family papers, and courthouse records that together reveal a mystery Alabama spent generations trying to bury. The deeper researchers examined those records, the more the story changed. What first appeared to be the tale of a dangerous enslaved woman gradually became something far more unsettling. It became the story of 3 respected plantation families who feared not what she had done, but what she knew. The first name that refused to stay buried was not found in a newspaper. It was found in the margin of a worn plantation account book from central Alabama, where a bookkeeper had crossed out one owner's name and written another beside it. There was no explanation, only a date in the early 1840s and a transfer that seemed ordinary until every surrounding page was examined. Historians often pay attention to what records include. Just as often, they pay attention to what someone tried to erase. The ink over the original entry was thicker than the rest of the ledger. The correction had been made months later, perhaps years. Someone had gone back, carefully changing the record without removing it entirely. That single alteration became the first loose thread. Following it led into probate files, tax rolls, and courthouse documents scattered across 3 Alabama counties. Most of the records survived only because they had been stored with unrelated estate papers after the Civil War. None of them told a complete story. Together, they hinted that 3 neighboring cotton families had become entangled in a dispute nobody wished to describe openly. At first glance, the families appeared prosperous. Large harvests, expanding acreage, new purchases of livestock and equipment. Everything suggested success. Then, almost without warning, the paper trail changed. Land sales accelerated. Loans appeared. Property shifted between relatives with unusual urgency. Even experienced researchers noticed the pattern immediately. Prosperous plantations rarely reorganized themselves so quickly unless something serious had happened behind closed doors. Yet no lawsuit explained the changes. No newspaper announced a financial collapse. No sheriff's notice advertised a public auction. It was as though everyone involved had silently agreed that whatever happened would never become public knowledge. One county judge left behind a personal notebook describing several unusually tense estate meetings during those years. He never explained the reason. Instead, he simply remarked that certain gentlemen arrived already divided before any testimony had begun. The wording was strange. Divided by what? Nobody wrote the answer. Local ministers also left clues without realizing it. Church disciplinary minutes from nearby congregations recorded disagreements among respected planters who had worshipped together for years. The accusations were vague. Broken trust, false statements, conduct unbecoming a Christian gentleman. Nothing more. The details had either been omitted or deliberately withheld. Among the enslaved community, however, silence carried a different meaning. Plantation journals occasionally mentioned workers refusing reassignment between neighboring estates. Such resistance was uncommon. Transfers usually occurred without explanation in surviving records. Yet here, several overseers complained that experienced field hands became unusually anxious whenever certain names appeared on transfer lists. No one explained why. One overseer complained that productivity collapsed for nearly 2 weeks after a particular exchange of laborers. Another noted that older enslaved men seemed to know something they refused to discuss. He blamed stubbornness. Modern historians suspect something else. People living under slavery often protected information through silence. Speaking openly could destroy entire families. Remaining silent sometimes kept them alive. The mystery deepened with a bundle of private correspondence preserved by accident inside an attorney's files. Most of the letters discussed cotton prices, river transportation, weather, routine business. Then one sentence interrupted everything. I advise against allowing him to visit that place again after sundown. No location. No explanation. Only concern. The attorney never identified who him referred to. Nor did he explain what made nighttime visits so dangerous. Researchers searched neighboring letters hoping for context. Instead, they found another puzzle. Several pages had been carefully removed decades earlier. The cuts were clean. Deliberate. Someone wanted future readers to find gaps instead of answers. Those missing pages may have contained nothing important, or they may have contained everything. County tax records revealed another oddity. One planter suddenly reduced the number of enslaved people listed under his ownership despite harvesting nearly the same amount of cotton the following season. That should not have been possible, unless workers had been borrowed, hidden, or recorded elsewhere. The numbers simply refused to fit. A census comparison raised even more questions. Households that had appeared stable suddenly exchanged laborers with remarkable frequency. The transfers stretched across only 3 plantations. Always the same circle. Always the same neighboring families. Always within a remarkably short period. Coincidence became harder to believe. One elderly clerk later recalled hearing arguments outside the county office involving 2 prominent landowners. His recollections survived in an interview recorded decades afterward. He admitted he never heard the beginning of the dispute, only the ending. According to his memory, one man shouted that it should have ended with the first arrangement. The other reportedly answered that nothing ends once everyone knows. Everyone? Who exactly was everyone? The clerk never learned. Neither did the historian who later interviewed him. Not every clue came from official records. Travel diaries written by merchants passing through Alabama occasionally mentioned unusual tension among several wealthy households. One visitor remarked that dinner invitations had abruptly stopped between families who had entertained one another for years. Another noted that business partnerships seemed unusually strained despite excellent cotton prices. Neither traveler knew the cause. They simply noticed the atmosphere. Something had fractured relationships that once appeared unbreakable. Then came the first genuine surprise. Buried within an estate inventory was an object that had no obvious connection to cotton production. A locked wooden box. Unlike furniture or farm tools, it received its own detailed description. The inventory stated that the box should remain unopened until reviewed by estate representatives. That instruction was highly unusual. Unfortunately, the box itself disappeared. No probate record ever listed its contents. No receipt acknowledged its transfer. It simply vanished from the historical record. Historians have offered several theories. Perhaps it contained financial documents, private correspondence, family records, or something capable of embarrassing influential people. No one can say with certainty. Only the disappearance remains documented. Around the same time, newspaper editors began printing surprisingly indirect notices. Nothing sensational. Nothing dramatic. Small announcements describing dissolved partnerships, postponed auctions, and unexpected changes in legal representation. Each notice appeared insignificant alone. Together, they clustered around the same handful of families. Patterns like that rarely emerge by accident. Meanwhile, overseers grew increasingly frustrated. Their journals complained about whispered conversations ending the moment anyone approached. Groups breaking apart unexpectedly. Longtime workers exchanging quiet signals across neighboring fields. The overseers interpreted everything as defiance. They seldom considered another possibility. Perhaps information was moving through the enslaved community far faster than through the planter class itself. Information could travel without paper, without meetings, without leaving evidence. That possibility frightened plantation authorities more than almost anything else. Knowledge could not be chained as easily as people. One surviving letter from a county sheriff hinted at growing concern. He requested additional deputies during an upcoming property settlement involving several respected citizens. The request mentioned no violence, yet it emphasized maintaining good order should unexpected disagreements arise. Extra deputies for an estate meeting. That alone suggested serious anxiety. The sheriff's request was approved. The meeting occurred. No official report survives describing what happened inside. But afterward, 3 witnesses independently remembered seeing participants leave through separate doors rather than together. None spoke to the others. None acknowledged one another publicly. Years of friendship appeared to end within a single afternoon. Modern researchers still debate what happened in that room. No transcript exists. No diary provides certainty. Only scattered reactions remain. One planter expanded his operations westward almost immediately afterward. Another sold valuable acreage despite favorable market conditions. A third rewrote his will. Major decisions, made within months. History sometimes hides its most revealing moments inside ordinary paperwork. This seemed to be one of them. Then researchers uncovered perhaps the strangest detail of all. A survey map folded inside county land records contained handwritten marks added years after its creation. 3 plantations had been lightly circled. A narrow road connected them. Beside the road appeared 4 faded words. Not the first meeting. No signature. No explanation. Just 4 words capable of changing everything. If there had been earlier meetings, who attended them? What had been discussed? And why had someone wanted future readers to notice that single road above every other path in the county? Those questions would lead investigators toward a forgotten cache of legal papers, documents that had remained unopened for generations because they had been filed under the wrong estate. Inside was a sworn statement that should never have survived. And if it was genuine, it threatened to expose not merely one hidden scandal, but the foundation upon which 3 of Alabama's most respected families had built their reputations. The forgotten legal papers were not stored with the family everyone expected. They had been folded into the estate of a county merchant who had served as a witness in dozens of unrelated transactions during the 1840s. That mistake kept them hidden for more than a century. When historians finally unfolded the brittle pages, they found no dramatic confession. They found procedure. Dates, signatures, property descriptions, the kind of paperwork most researchers skim without a second thought. Then one sworn statement interrupted the routine language. A respected planter testified that certain transfers of enslaved laborers had been made to preserve the peace between interested parties. Nothing more. No names. No explanation of the dispute. Only that unusual phrase, preserve the peace. The wording caught immediate attention. Estate records usually spoke of debts, inheritances, or boundary disagreements. They rarely hinted at private conflicts serious enough to require carefully arranged transfers. The document raised more questions than it answered. Why would moving enslaved people from one plantation to another calm tensions between wealthy landowners? And why had the court accepted that explanation without demanding further detail? Another page offered a clue. The transfer had not involved an entire work gang. Only a handful of experienced laborers. That alone was unusual. Planters depended on skilled workers. They rarely exchanged them unless absolutely necessary. The financial loss made little sense, yet the transfers continued. A cotton factor in Mobile unknowingly added another piece to the puzzle. His account book showed delayed shipments from all 3 plantations during the same harvest season. The delays lasted only weeks, but in the cotton trade, even short interruptions could cost thousands of dollars. Business partners noticed. One merchant wrote that his clients appeared distracted by domestic concerns. He never explained what those concerns were. Perhaps he never knew. Perhaps no one dared tell him. County commissioners also sensed something changing. Meeting minutes recorded repeated requests for additional patrols along roads connecting neighboring plantations. Officially, the concern involved stolen livestock. Unofficially, later historians questioned that explanation. Livestock theft did not normally require repeated patrols over several months. Something else may have been occupying local authorities. An overseer's journal added another layer of uncertainty. He complained that trusted workers seemed unusually alert whenever riders approached from adjoining estates. Field assignments were completed. Orders were followed. But conversations stopped instantly. Eyes shifted toward the road. The overseer interpreted the silence as disobedience. Modern scholars often interpret it differently. Communities living under slavery developed sophisticated ways of sharing information while revealing almost nothing to those in power. Warnings could move across miles without leaving written evidence. One county tax assessor left behind a private memorandum that historians almost overlooked. He described visiting one plantation where the owner insisted on conducting business outdoors rather than inside the main house. The assessor found the request peculiar. The planter repeatedly glanced toward nearby buildings, lowered his voice, and hurried the meeting to an abrupt end. The memorandum ended with a single sentence. He appears fearful of being overheard. Fear was not an emotion commonly associated with wealthy planters in official records. Authority, confidence, control. Those were the qualities they preferred to display. Yet private papers occasionally revealed something different. Pressure, suspicion, unease. Those emotions surfaced again in correspondence between 2 attorneys handling separate estate matters. Neither lawyer identified the underlying dispute. Both referred to persistent rumors damaging to respectable families. Rumors, not accusations, not proven facts, just rumors powerful enough to concern men whose livelihoods depended upon reputation. Then came the first genuine twist. Researchers discovered that one of the sworn witnesses had quietly changed his testimony several months later. Not publicly. The revision appeared only in a supplemental filing attached to unrelated land documents. Most historians believe the second statement escaped notice because it had been filed under the wrong docket. The witness did not retract his earlier testimony. He merely added one important sentence. I was not present at the earliest arrangement. Earliest arrangement. Those 2 words echoed the survey map found earlier. Not the first meeting. Now another record hinted at an arrangement before the documented transfers ever began. Something had happened earlier. Something important enough that later legal proceedings assumed everyone already understood it. Only modern readers were left in the dark. The courthouse itself became part of the mystery. Several docket books covering those years showed missing pages. Not torn accidentally. Removed cleanly. Thread bindings had been carefully cut. Someone had known exactly which pages to take. Missing records are not uncommon in 19th century courthouses. Fire, floods, neglect, all played their part. But selective removals always attract attention, especially when surrounding pages survive untouched. A retired archivist later remarked that such gaps often reflected embarrassment rather than disaster. Documents disappear for many reasons. Reputation is one of them. Meanwhile, census comparisons revealed another unsettling pattern. Several white employees left the 3 plantations within months of one another. Overseers, bookkeepers, wagon supervisors, men who normally remained for years. Their departures were unusually abrupt. One accepted lower wages elsewhere. Another abandoned an unfinished contract. A third vanished from local records altogether. Historians cannot prove the departures were connected, but the timing remains difficult to ignore. A local minister unknowingly preserved another clue. His notebook mentioned counseling 2 prominent planters separately during the same autumn. He described both men as exhausted, distrustful, unable to reconcile with former associates. He never recorded the cause, only the result. One refused communion for several weeks. The other stopped attending altogether. Church records rarely capture hidden scandals directly. Instead, they preserve changes in behavior. Sometimes that is enough. As researchers assembled these scattered fragments, a larger picture slowly emerged. The dispute did not appear to involve land, nor unpaid debts, nor politics. Every practical explanation gradually fell away. Whatever divided these families reached far beyond business. Even neighboring planters noticed. A traveler passing through Alabama wrote that dinner conversations became strangely cautious whenever certain surnames were mentioned. Voices lowered. Subjects changed. Someone always suggested discussing the cotton market instead. Silence had become a form of protection. Then another forgotten inventory surfaced. Unlike previous estate records, this one listed personal papers individually. Most entries were ordinary. Receipts, farm accounts, insurance certificates. Then came one line. A sealed packet of correspondence withheld by instruction. Withheld. Not destroyed. Not misplaced. Simply withheld. No explanation followed. The packet itself has never been found. Researchers still debate whether it survived at all. Some believe descendants quietly removed it. Others suspect it remained hidden inside another uncatalogued collection. No one knows. The uncertainty only deepened when handwriting experts examined surviving signatures from the period. Several documents appeared to have been signed under obvious emotional strain. The pen strokes trembled. Ink pooled where the writer hesitated. One signature looked so different that archivists initially believed another person had written it. Medical historians caution against reading too much into handwriting. Illness, fatigue, age, all can alter a signature. Yet when viewed alongside every other clue, the changes become difficult to dismiss entirely. Pressure leaves marks, sometimes on paper, sometimes on people. An aging county clerk offered perhaps the most haunting recollection preserved from the period. Interviewed late in life, he remembered seeing one planter arrive at the courthouse before sunrise. The man remained alone on the front steps for nearly an hour. He carried no ledger, no legal papers, only a small envelope. When the courthouse opened, he walked inside without speaking to anyone. He emerged minutes later. The envelope was gone. The clerk never learned what it contained. No filing matched the visit. No receipt acknowledged its delivery. The record simply vanished. Then historians uncovered one final surprise before the trail went cold. Inside an overlooked surveyor's notebook appeared a list of roads inspected after heavy rain. Most entries discussed bridges and drainage. One notation stood apart. Road closed at owner's request, visitors redirected. No flood. No fallen trees. Only the owner's request. Closing a private road during harvest season made little economic sense. Unless preventing movement mattered more than moving cotton. That realization changed the investigation. Researchers stopped asking what had been hidden inside the plantations. Instead, they began asking who had been prevented from reaching them. The answer seemed impossibly close. Because tucked inside a neglected bundle of sheriff's correspondence was the name of a male witness who had never appeared in any court record. His statement had been requested. His testimony had been expected. Yet somehow, he never took the stand. And the reason for his disappearance would pull the entire mystery into far darker territory. The missing witness was not difficult to identify. Finding out why he never appeared was another matter. His name surfaced inside a sheriff's receipt book, squeezed between routine entries for livestock disputes and unpaid taxes. A deputy had been instructed to locate him before a scheduled hearing involving the same 3 plantation families. Beside the order, someone had written one unexpected word. Unavailable. Nothing else. No illness. No death. No explanation. For historians, that single word became another dead end. Until a second document surfaced hundreds of miles away. It was a freight ledger from a river landing along the Alabama River. Most names listed teamsters, merchants, and cotton brokers, but among them appeared the same man. His destination was not another plantation. It was Mississippi. The timing was remarkable. He departed only days before he was expected to testify. Coincidence remained possible. Yet the sequence raised uncomfortable questions. Did he leave willingly? Was he encouraged to leave? Or had someone quietly ensured he would never reach the courthouse? The sheriff never issued another summons. That silence proved almost as revealing as the missing testimony itself. Researchers then turned their attention away from court records. Instead, they examined plantation payroll books. Not because enslaved laborers received wages. Most did not. But because overseers often recorded extra payments to hired craftsmen, drivers, blacksmiths, and temporary workers. One ledger contained several unexplained entries. 3 men had been hired for only a single week. Their names never appeared again. Their assignment was described with one vague phrase. Night duty. Night duty where? Watching what? Or whom? No answer followed. An experienced archivist later observed that plantation bookkeeping was often brutally practical. Owners rarely spent money without recording the reason. The absence of detail here stood out precisely because everything else was so specific. The pattern continued. Another plantation purchased additional lantern oil during the same month, nearly 3 times the normal amount. Not during harvest, not during planting, during an otherwise ordinary stretch of the year. Lanterns burning through the night suggested unusual activity. Someone wanted work or watchfulness to continue after dark. Then another overlooked record quietly changed the investigation. It came from a local physician. His surviving account book listed visits to neighboring plantations, broken bones, fevers, childhood illnesses, routine medical care. Then, over the course of 2 weeks, he made repeated calls to all 3 estates. The diagnosis column remained blank. Every visit, blank. Historians cannot know whether confidentiality or simple haste explains the omissions. But repeated visits to 3 connected plantations within days immediately attracted attention. Something serious had disturbed the entire neighborhood. Even more surprising was the physician's bill. It remained unpaid for almost 18 months. That rarely happened among wealthy cotton planters. One researcher suggested the delayed payment reflected financial strain. Another proposed something different. Perhaps settling accounts required reopening a chapter everyone wished to forget. Neither theory can be proven. Both remain plausible. Meanwhile, local newspapers remained almost silent. No scandal. No public accusations. Only an odd increase in legal notices announcing changes in trustees and property managers. On their own, the announcements meant little. Together, they suggested relationships were shifting behind closed doors. One county historian noticed another subtle clue. Election returns from the period showed several prominent landowners no longer campaigning together. Men who had publicly supported one another suddenly appeared on opposite sides of local issues. Politics had become personal. No editorial explained why. Then came an unexpected discovery inside a warehouse inventory. A locked cabinet belonging to one plantation office contained bundles of correspondence tied with colored cord. Most bundles survived. One space on the shelf stood empty. Attached to the vacant space hung a handwritten label. Removed by instruction. Removed by whom? The inventory never said. The historian who first published the record admitted that empty space fascinated him more than the papers that remained. Absence can preserve its own kind of evidence. At about the same time, another source emerged. It was not written by a planter, nor a lawyer, nor a judge. It came from a Methodist circuit writer who traveled across rural Alabama. His journal described spending several nights near the plantations during the years in question. He avoided gossip. He focused on roads, weather, and sermons. Yet one passage stood apart. He wrote that good order exists only in daylight. The sentence ended there. No elaboration. No names. Readers have debated its meaning ever since. Perhaps he referred to ordinary crime. Perhaps he sensed tensions that respectable society refused to acknowledge. Either way, the observation aligned with growing evidence that much of the mystery unfolded after sunset. The emotional strain also became harder to ignore. One plantation owner's handwriting changed dramatically over successive seasons. Early letters were confident, neat, measured. Later correspondence grew rushed. Margins filled with corrections. Sentences broke off unfinished. His business remained profitable. Yet his writing suggested a man under relentless pressure. The people around him noticed. A neighboring merchant later described him as unusually suspicious. Meetings shortened. Visitors were questioned before entering. Even longtime associates were received cautiously. Trust had become scarce. Among enslaved communities, the atmosphere also shifted. Overseers repeatedly complained that experienced workers anticipated inspections before riders arrived. Tools disappeared before searches began. Messages seemed to travel faster than horses. Authorities interpreted this as organized resistance. Modern historians tend to view it as evidence of highly effective communication networks built under extraordinary danger. Information itself had become valuable, perhaps more valuable than money. Then a minor twist altered the timeline. A newly digitized tax register revealed that one disputed transfer previously dated to 1843 had actually occurred late in 1842. The difference seemed insignificant. until researchers realized it placed the transfer before several supposed triggering events. Everything had happened earlier than anyone believed. That discovery forced historians to reconsider every previous assumption. Perhaps the transfers were not reactions. Perhaps they were preparations for what remained unknown. Another curious document emerged from a bank archive. One planter withdrew an unusually large amount of cash without recording its purpose. Large cash withdrawals were uncommon. Most major transactions involved notes or credit. Cash left fewer traces. The withdrawal occurred only 4 days after the mysterious nighttime hearing recorded in the plantation ledger. No receipt explained where the money went. No matching deposit appeared elsewhere. It simply vanished into the historical record. The coincidences were becoming increasingly difficult to dismiss. Even so, no single document revealed the complete picture. Each clue remained frustratingly incomplete, like pieces from several different puzzles mixed into one box. Then historians found something they had not expected. Inside a family Bible tucked between pages recording births and deaths rested a folded scrap of paper. It was not a letter. It was a list. Just surnames. 6 of them. 3 belonged to the plantation families already under investigation. The remaining 3 belonged to men who had served as witnesses, attorneys, or public officials. Every name had been crossed through. Except one. No explanation accompanied the list. No date. No signature. Only one untouched name remained. Researchers spent years identifying its owner. When they finally succeeded, another surprise emerged. The surviving records placed that man hundreds of miles away during the supposed height of the dispute. Or so everyone believed. A shipping manifest proved otherwise. For 3 undocumented days, he was in Alabama. No diary mentioned the visit. No hotel register survived. No business contract explained the journey. Yet he was undeniably present. His arrival overlapped precisely with the period when the missing witness disappeared from county records. That could have meant nothing. Or everything. The mystery deepened further when surveyors restoring an abandoned courthouse basement uncovered a forgotten storage compartment sealed behind shelving installed decades later. Inside were dozens of neglected bundles awaiting cataloging. Most contained routine tax assessments. One bundle carried a faded notation that stopped researchers cold. Private examination never entered. If the label reflected its original purpose, the documents inside had been gathered for official review, but had never become part of the public record. And lying on top of that unopened bundle was a folded memorandum bearing the signature of the county sheriff himself. Its first line suggested that at least one influential man had finally decided to tell the truth. The second line suggested someone had tried to stop him. The sheriff's memorandum was only 3 pages long. Yet every surviving line suggested that someone in authority had finally realized the dispute threatened far more than a disagreement over property. The opening paragraph referred to private allegations circulating among several respected citizens. Not criminal charges. Not formal complaints. Allegations. That single word mattered. In the legal language of the 1840s, an allegation could destroy a reputation long before any evidence reached a courtroom. The sheriff never described the accusation itself. Instead, he focused on its consequences. Meetings were becoming secretive. Witnesses were becoming reluctant. Documents were changing hands without being entered into public record. Even more unusual, he noted that several influential men had begun refusing to sign routine statements unless additional witnesses were present. That behavior was almost unheard of. Trust had vanished. One county commissioner left a brief note in the margin of a meeting ledger. "It is no longer wise for gentlemen to meet alone." No explanation followed. Historians have debated that sentence for years. Some believe it reflected fear of violence. Others believe it reflected fear of false accusations. Either possibility reveals the same reality. The atmosphere had become poisonous. The sheriff attempted to interview several plantation employees. Most answered only the questions they could not avoid. Names, dates, routine matters. Anything beyond that was met with silence. Official reports described the interviews as unproductive. Modern historians read those reports differently. Silence often reflected calculation rather than ignorance. People understood that speaking openly could cost them everything. One elderly laborer reportedly looked directly at a deputy before saying only one sentence. "Paper remembers less than people." The deputy dismissed the remark. He recorded nothing else. But decades later, when that report resurfaced, the sentence attracted immediate attention. because it explained why the written record remained so incomplete. The truth had survived in memory, not in ink. Researchers then discovered another overlooked collection: insurance inspections conducted before the Civil War. Inspectors traveled from plantation to plantation evaluating buildings, equipment, and financial risk. Their reports rarely mentioned personal matters. One inspection, however, broke that pattern. The inspector described the plantation as profitable. The cotton looked excellent. The buildings were well maintained. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added a single observation: the owner appears unusually concerned with restricting visitors. That was not a financial note. It was a personal one. Something had clearly caught the inspector's attention. Another inspection completed only weeks later described neighboring estates in almost identical language. 3 different plantations, 3 different reports, the same quiet concern. By now, the pattern could no longer be ignored. Then came another twist. A university researcher comparing handwriting noticed that one important legal document had been prepared by 2 different clerks. The first half was written carefully. The final page changed style completely. Different ink, different handwriting. Even the spacing between lines shifted. Nothing illegal about that, except the change occurred immediately before the signatures. Why replace the clerk at the most important moment? No surviving explanation exists, yet the alteration suggested interruptions inside the courthouse itself. The emotional strain among the families also became increasingly visible. Business correspondence turned cold. Letters that once opened with friendly greetings became painfully formal. Requests for assistance disappeared. Simple transactions suddenly required lawyers. Even neighboring merchants noticed. One cotton broker privately complained that ordinary sales now required twice the paper and half the trust. His frustration was obvious. Whatever had happened behind closed doors was beginning to affect business throughout the county. Meanwhile, plantation journals revealed another subtle change. Experienced overseers were being replaced. Not gradually. Abruptly. One resigned after nearly 12 years. Another accepted work hundreds of miles away. Neither departure included the customary letter of recommendation. That absence was unusual. Former employers normally praised loyal overseers. Here they simply let them go. One replacement lasted less than 3 months. His notebook survives. It contains almost nothing about farming. Instead, it repeatedly mentions locked offices, restricted records, unexpected visitors arriving after sunset. He never identified them, only their frequency. Historians often become suspicious when ordinary records stop discussing ordinary life. That was happening here. Cotton production had almost disappeared from the journals. Everything revolved around secrecy. Then another forgotten document surfaced. A railroad survey completed years later interviewed local residents about old property boundaries. Most answers concerned fences and streams. One elderly respondent volunteered something unexpected. He pointed toward 3 neighboring plantations and remarked that those places carried trouble before the railroad ever came. The surveyor ignored the comment. It had nothing to do with boundary lines. For modern researchers, however, it was invaluable. Even decades later, local memory still linked those estates together. Not because of prosperity, because of scandal. Yet no one explained the scandal itself. The mystery remained carefully wrapped inside silence. Researchers then examined probate sales following the deaths of several principal figures. Most estate auctions were predictable. Furniture, livestock, farm equipment, books. One auction included an item that stood apart. One iron dispatch box, empty. Empty. That single word frustrated everyone studying the case. Dispatch boxes were designed to protect valuable correspondence. If the box was empty by the time of the sale, when had its contents been removed? And by whom? No inventory answered those questions. Then came perhaps the strongest emotional reaction preserved anywhere in the record. A respected attorney wrote to a business associate that he wished to withdraw entirely from the unpleasant affairs of these gentlemen. He admitted losing sleep. He complained that every conversation produced another contradiction. Most strikingly, he confessed that no one seemed willing to tell the entire story. Only fragments. Always fragments. Even the attorney could no longer determine which statements reflected fact and which reflected rumor. That confusion spread rapidly. Historians reviewing the correspondence reached a sobering conclusion. By the late 1840s, the original dispute may already have become buried beneath years of half-truths, strategic omissions, and deliberate misunderstanding. The participants themselves may have struggled to separate reality from reputation. Then a breakthrough arrived from an unexpected source. Not Alabama. Washington. Inside federal land records, researchers found correspondence involving one of the principal landowners. The letters discussed acreage, road access, tax assessments, routine government business, until the final page. There in the margin appeared a handwritten instruction. Delay certification pending local settlement. Local settlement of what? Federal officials offered no explanation, but the notation confirmed something important. The dispute had grown serious enough to interrupt unrelated government paperwork. That was extraordinary. The same month, another county official quietly resigned. His replacement inherited unfinished files. Among them appeared one folder marked simply, "Hold." No surname, no case number, only that single word. The contents have never been located. Whether they were misplaced, destroyed, or intentionally removed remains unknown. Then historians made one last comparison. They aligned every surviving document by date. Letters, tax rolls, court filings, church minutes, estate records, insurance inspections, transportation ledgers. One period stood out immediately. For nearly 17 days, almost every surviving source fell silent. No correspondence, no recorded meetings, no business contracts, nothing. Before those 17 days, the documentary trail was active. Afterward, it resumed almost normally. The silence sat in the middle like a missing chapter. Researchers have never explained it completely, but one possibility continues to trouble them. Perhaps those 17 days contain the decisions that reshaped every life connected to the case. If so, the written record had failed precisely where it mattered most. Or perhaps, someone had made certain it would. Only one source remained unopened. A packet of personal correspondence sealed by descendants and donated to an archive with strict access restrictions decades earlier. When those restrictions finally expired, archivists expected routine family letters. Instead, the very first envelope contained a statement that directly challenged everything investigators thought they understood. And if the writer had been telling the truth, then the three powerful families had spent generations blaming the wrong person while protecting the men who had created the scandal from the very beginning. The sealed correspondence did not contain a confession. It contained disappointment. The writer, a respected attorney who had spent years handling land disputes across central Alabama, admitted that he no longer believed the public story surrounding the three plantations. He never claimed innocence. He never accused anyone directly. Instead, he wrote that the tale repeated throughout the county bears little resemblance to the facts first reported. That sentence changed everything. For decades, local tradition had blamed a single enslaved person for the destruction of three respected households. The surviving documents suggested something entirely different. The attorney described powerful men protecting their own standing long before they sought the truth. Private meetings multiplied. Witnesses disappeared. Records changed hands, not because one person possessed extraordinary influence, but because influential families feared public humiliation more than private injustice. Historians reading the collection noticed something else. The attorney never referred to scandal in moral terms. He treated it as a problem of reputation. That distinction mattered. In plantation society, reputation secured credit. Reputation secured political office. Reputation secured marriages, partnerships, and inheritance. Once damaged, it rarely recovered. The letters revealed growing panic among prominent landowners. Not fear of criminal prosecution, fear that neighbors would stop believing them. That fear explained decisions which had puzzled researchers for years. The hurried land sales, the rewritten wills, the dissolved partnerships, the carefully arranged transfers. Each action now appeared less mysterious. Each looked like an attempt to contain a crisis before it spread beyond county lines. Yet one mystery still remained. Why had later generations remembered only the enslaved person at the center of the controversy, while forgetting the conduct of the men who controlled the plantations? The answer emerged gradually. County newspapers after the Civil War began publishing family histories celebrating the region's earliest settlers. They praised prosperity, industry, agricultural success. Certain difficult years simply disappeared from the narrative. Entire disputes vanished between one paragraph and the next. Silence became inheritance. Children grew into adults hearing only polished versions of the past. The uncomfortable details remained locked inside courthouse boxes and forgotten ledgers. One historian compared the surviving evidence to footprints after heavy rain. Most had washed away. Enough remained to reveal the direction people had traveled. Not every step, but enough. Researchers also discovered that descendants preserved remarkably little correspondence from those critical years. Letters before the dispute survived. Letters decades afterwards survived. The middle years produced astonishing gaps. Some families undoubtedly discarded papers during moves or estate sales. Others may have destroyed them deliberately. There is no way to know. Absence itself became part of the evidence. Then another small discovery quietly settled one long-standing question. The mysterious road marked on the old survey map was compared against later county surveys. It had not disappeared naturally. It had been officially abandoned. A replacement road bypassed the three plantations completely. Engineers cited convenience. Local memory suggested another possibility. Sometimes communities stop using roads because they no longer wish to revisit what happened along them. The truth may never be known. One final probate file offered another unexpected detail. Among ordinary receipts for livestock and equipment appeared payment for copying legal documents. The copies themselves no longer exist. Only the receipt survived. Someone had invested considerable money reproducing papers that later vanished. Copies were made. Then copies disappeared. That sequence deeply unsettled modern archivists. It suggested conscious preservation followed by equally conscious removal. Meanwhile, church records revealed quiet reconciliation among some of the surviving participants years later. Not friendship, not forgiveness, merely coexistence. Several names appeared together again on committee lists and charitable subscriptions. Public life resumed. Private trust likely never did. The emotional cost lingered long after the paperwork ended. Business recovered. Harvests improved. New generations inherited prosperous plantations. Yet the documentary trail suggests the principal men involved never fully escaped the shadow of those disputed years. Their signatures remained cautious, their legal agreements unusually detailed, their partnerships increasingly limited. Experience had altered them. For the enslaved community, however, the consequences ran far deeper. Transfers recorded so casually in plantation ledgers represented families divided, friendships interrupted, and lives redirected without consent. The official documents measured value in dollars. Human memory measured it differently. That difference echoes through every surviving record. Modern historians continue debating one final question. Was there ever a single explosive secret? Or did dozens of smaller compromises gradually become one enormous scandal? The evidence leans toward the second possibility. One concealed meeting required another. One altered record demanded another correction. One private arrangement created new witnesses. Those witnesses required silence. Silence demanded still more compromises. Eventually, no participant could safely reveal the entire story. Each man knew only part of it, or chose to remember only part. That realization also transformed the legend itself. Later generations claimed one enslaved person had somehow manipulated three wealthy families. The surviving evidence does not support such a simple conclusion. Instead, the records point toward powerful men whose rivalries, secrecy, ambition, and determination to preserve public honor steadily pulled their own households apart. The legend shifted blame downward. The documents point upward. That is perhaps the greatest historical lesson hidden inside this forgotten case. Plantation records often preserve ownership. Court records preserve disputes. Tax rolls preserve wealth. But none of them easily preserve responsibility. Responsibility has to be reconstructed from fragments. Margins, corrections, missing pages, unpaid bills, abandoned roads, interrupted partnerships, silences that last 17 days. Those fragments rarely tell comfortable stories, yet together they reveal something remarkably human. History is not always buried because nobody cared to remember. Sometimes it is buried because too many people remembered exactly what happened, and they agreed never to speak of it again. Today, researchers still revisit those Alabama courthouses, church books, plantation ledgers, and probate files. New collections continue to surface. Another forgotten box may yet contain a letter that changes the timeline once more. That possibility is what keeps historical investigation alive. The mystery was never about discovering one dramatic document. It was about listening carefully to hundreds of ordinary records that quietly contradicted the story everyone thought they knew. Perhaps that is the most unsettling discovery of all. The greatest secrets of the plantation South were not always hidden in locked safes or sealed courtrooms. Many were left in plain sight, scattered across ordinary pieces of paper that no one thought to read together until generations had passed. And when they finally were, they revealed not a legend of one dangerous individual, but a cautionary story about power, fear, and the extraordinary lengths respectable men would go to protect a carefully constructed reputation. If you enjoy uncovering forgotten chapters of history through the surviving records they left behind, consider subscribing for more stories that history almost allowed to disappear.